It's the autumn of 2005. The big game releases are piling up on the horizon and fighting for gamers' attention. October, Doom 3 Resurrection of Evil, Black and White 2, FIFA 06, Serious Sam 2, Fear, Quake 4, Age of Empires 3, Shadow of the Colossus, X-Men Legends 2, GTA Liberty City Stories, Call of Duty 2, Civilization 4, Resident Evil 4. November, 007 From Russia with Love, Castlevania Curse of Darkness, Star Wars Battlefront 2, Mario Party 7, Fatal Frame 3, Condemned Criminal Origins, Need for Speed Most Wanted, Perfect Dark Zero, Dragon Quest 8, Prince of Persia The Two Thrones. Those are some of the biggest releases for those 2 months. Among all of those games, there was one which you could say it was released 2 years too late. I'm talking about The Matrix Path of Neo. In my humble opinion, this is the best game based on a movie, or in this case movies, despite being very flawed. It's developed by Shiny Entertainment. Shiny Entertainment was founded in 1993 by David Perry, a Northern Irish video game developer and programmer. He worked on games such as Disney's Aladdin and Cool Spot. In 1994 and 95, Shiny releases 2 critically and commercially acclaimed games, Earthworm Jim 1 and 2 respectively. Both of them were hits and instant classics remembered to this day. The next game produced by Shiny was MDK, a third-person shooter holding in its code the trademark wackiness of the company. Another smash hit. Released in 1997, the game was used as a benchmark for new video cards. The future of Shiny Entertainment looks to be very bright. 3 games, 3 hits. Well, not quite. Cloudy storms were on the horizon. In 1995, David Perry sold his company to Interplay. Years later, he calls his decision the worst mistake I've ever made. He wasn't sure if his team will be able to transit from 2D graphics to 3D. After making MDK, the studio was also working on several games simultaneously, stretching the studio talents. Wild 9, RC Stunt Copter, Messiah, and Sacrifice. None of them sold well. In 2002, Interplay was in financial troubles and sold Shiny to Infogrames Inc., later renamed to Atari Inc. At that time, the studio was working on their first licensed game, Enter the Matrix. The game was released in 2003 in the same month as The Matrix Reloaded. It was a commercial hit and sold 5 million copies worldwide thanks to the hype machine. The movies were still a thing at the time, but the game was rushed. It's obvious in every single aspect of the game. I played it for a couple of hours years ago and all the criticisms you can read online are true. The game is janky, ugly and have unfinished feeling. However, I still think it's not as bad as most people say it is. Also, people do not like that you play as side characters and not Neo. From here until their last game, The Golden Compass, they develop only movie licensed games. Most of them were rubbish. There is one exception, the game topic of this video. In 2006, Atari sold Shiny to Foundation 9 Entertainment. They merged them with The Collective, a game company that had decent track record. Star Trek Deep Space Nine The Fallen, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Indiana Jones and the Emperor's Tomb, and Mark's Echoes Getting Up, contents under pressure. The latter is really good, I reviewed it a long time ago and it's available on Steam. Both companies formed Double Helix Games. You probably heard of them. They were the second developer to get their hands on the Silent Hill license, and we know how this ends up. After that they spew license after license rubbish games, until 2013. They remade Killer Instinct and in 2014 they remade Strider. In 2014, Double Helix were bought from Amazon, becoming part of the Amazon Game Studios and never to be seen or heard again. Just as they found games they were passionate about. Before I moved on with the rest of the video, I have to point one more thing. In both Matrix games developed by Shiny, the Wachowskis were involved. In Enter the Matrix less, but for this game they were heavily involved as directors and writers. This actually led to some cool moments and some boring. The good outweighs the bad. Shiny's second attempt of making a game using the Matrix license is better than the first. It fixed a lot of the problems from Enter the Matrix, but not everything. I will talk in more details later in the video. You are controlling Neo. Hand-to-hand combat is improved, graphics compared to the first game are better, but it still feels rushed. The Matrix Path of Neo is released 2 years after Enter the Matrix, which is never a good sign. Lack of development time can really hurt a game. Despite that, it's still very fun. Let's dive into the code of the Matrix. path of Neo. Let's talk briefly about the graphics, just to clear this quickly out of the way. The graphics didn't age well and the game wasn't a looker even in 2005. Just look at the game I listed in the beginning. Only pointing fear is enough. I find particularly funny how the models look. Cutscenes using the engine are nicely choreographed using motion capture, but the character models are not very good looking and even weird. Although they have problems with the neck.
Mr. Anderson, I've been looking for you.
Also, small details like the lack of gravity on the clothes can be distracting. None of this bothers me. I actually find those type of bugs and oversights amusing. There is one in particular I will show you at the end of the video. If you haven't watched the movies, you will be totally lost on what's going on. Between the missions you watch scenes from the movies weirdly cut, jumping all over the place in the timeline. I think this might be an idea of the Wachowskis because by the end of the game they showed up as characters from Atari game, explaining that the ending of the trilogy don't work here. I agree with them when you do the story like here.
The real reason we're here is to discuss the big problem we faced in turning these 3 movies into a video game. You see, at this point in the story, Neo stands on the verge of Satori, ready to resolve the paradox of choice and choicelessness, of free will versus fate, but that can only be achieved through an act of surrender, which occurs after he has abandoned the perspectival nature of truth, accepting the totality of present consciousness, which ultimately allows an evolutionary transition, transcending the Cartesian dilemma through the emergence of delimited spirit, which then provides a world with a choice of a third path, the path of Neo, the path of peace.
You promised you wouldn't do that. Shit. Sorry. I think what my brother's trying to say is, at this point, it's martyr time. Now, maybe that works in a movie, but in a video game, the Jesus thing is, well,
Lame.
really lame.
If you don't know anything about the Matrix, you'll feel like dumped in disconnected action scenes. On the other hand, people that will play the game are already familiar with the movies, but you shouldn't alienate potential players. Also, they're trying and succeed most of the time to expand the universe through the levels and tell the story differently. The story part is very questionable to say the least. Often scenes are played in a completely different way than the movies. This is a very good idea for adding diversity and something new and meaningful. Everything fits in the world nicely, for the most part. Remember the scene when Neo didn't want to go outside the building? Now it's the only way to escape. If you get caught, it's game over. There is much more of this. I'm not going to list them all, but here is one more example. Instead of Neo just fighting Morpheus in the dojo, you go through series of challenges acting also as a tutorial for hand-to-hand fighting, weapon combat and other mechanics. It makes sense not only in the terms of the game, but also for the Matrix universe. You gain knowledge, so is Neo. Not everything worked the way it's supposed to. This will come up again later in the video. The way the story is told might be hit and miss, but what is important is the gameplay. There is one question might be burning in your mind. Does it make you feel like the chosen one? For the most part. It hits almost all the right spots. You can do all of Neo's moves, do cool stunts and even more, but it makes some missteps. Let's talk about the biggest one, the shooting. It's painfully mediocre. The problem comes from the lack of any kind of feedback when shooting enemies and if your shots land. The gun sounds are alright, but most of the time you are in slow motion and you hear them distorted. But I was never sure if my shots landed, especially if I was wall running or jumping in slow motion. What I eventually started doing is running straight at someone and or dodge and shoot. This was the surest way to know I hit someone. When you kill an enemy, electricity comes out of him and you know his code expired. Well, there is one weapon that gives very good feedback, the shotgun. It can set an enemy flying to the other side of the arena, which is pretty cool. However, the double barrel shotgun could be hacked and deleted permanently. The firing rate is way too slow. The rest of the guns are the usual suspects. You can hold up to 4. When the slots are full and on the ground is a weapon you want, drop it and Neo automatically will pick the new one. Most of the time you will use whatever is at hand or try to avoid shooting. If a game makes me want to avoid a mechanic, then something is not right, unfortunately. All weapons have one thing in common, they don't feel impactful and satisfying to shoot. With the exception of the shotgun, of course. Not all is disappointing. You can dual wield certain weapons, you can wall run and shoot, you can dodge bullets like in the scene from the rooftop. Wall running and shooting is fun. There is a cover mechanic which you can do a cartwheel and shoot simultaneously. Some firefights are quite tense and fun. There is even an effort put in the pickup animation. It doesn't just magically end up in your slots, but if the game was just shooting, no one will remember it. You'd be better off playing Max Payne. Thankfully the shiny green coat in the game is hand-to-hand combat.
You can't escape us.
Is that the best you can do, Mr. Anderson?
Now this is what I'm talking about. This makes you feel like Neo, punching, kicking, performing impossible stunts, moves and combos. It's awesome. The game doesn't have a complex fighting system. Path of Neo is a decent 3D beat 'em up. The game opens with Morpheus offering you the red and blue pill. Actually, if you choose the blue pill, Neo wakes up and the game ends. Boots you to the main menu. This is so cool. It's not even necessary, but I love details like this. When you decide eventually to take the red pill, it's time to choose the difficulty in the best way possible. Playing the game. You are dropped in a virtual recreation of the lobby scene. From the 2 lifts in front of you, enemies spawn. You start fighting them, but they gradually escalate in difficulty. You face here, if you can make it, almost every single enemy type, even agents. When you die, you are prompted to choose a difficulty. I've never played a game that gives you a taste of the gameplay before letting you choose the difficulty. If you have, let me know in the comments. I'm really curious if others do similar to this. After all this, you start all the tutorial levels. They teach you everything: hand-to-hand combat, stunning enemies, regular and special combos. Weapon fighting. Shooting and using the slowdown time mechanic. All this culminates in a fight with Morpheus in the dojo from the first movie. This is a bit expanded compared to the film, and you can wreck the whole place. How the combat works, you may ask? Quite simply, it's a button masher. I played the whole game with a mouse and keyboard, works perfectly. You have one attack button, jump, stun button, and slowing down time. Those are the main ones you use. When you start combining all of them is where the fun starts, especially when you have to fight multiple enemies. In this case, you have to change directions of your attacks, chaining hits, and beat the code out of them. The fight with Angel Smith's clones exemplifies that in the best way possible. It's my favorite part of the game. You fight constantly 5 Smiths. The rest surround you and resupply with enemies when needed. Here you can test almost all your moves. You have in the beginning 3-hit combo, later becomes 6, and when you reach the end of it, you are prompted to press some of the many button combos to do special devastating move that does tons of damage. All taken from the movies. If you are using the focus meter, slowing down time, it takes chunk of it. Different moves take a different amount. When you drain your focus meter, just a small part refills. The only way to restore it completely is to fight enemies without slowing down time. I noticed you can do different finishing moves in and out of slow motion. That way, all of them don't become too repetitive. And there is a bit of problem with those awesome moves. It's never explained how you can do some of them. I thought it was the directions of the movement controls I have to press while attacking, but it wasn't consistent. I just attack and wait to see what combo will show up. If I want to do this, I don't know how. Some need certain conditions like an airborne enemy to do them. I really like grabbing someone for the legs and slamming the coat out of him into the ground. Others have to be charged, which leaves you open to attacks, but if you manage to pull one off, you'll do massive damage to a single enemy or attack multiple targets. However, some feel like you can do them when the game decides to let you, or that they've loaded them to be accessible at certain levels. It's a bit disappointing on otherwise good combat. You get your new moves in 2 ways. At certain level the game gives you one, just like that, or between missions you have 1 point of something to choose some of the unlocked. They are presented in a cool way with symbols on a ring. Before acquiring a move, you can see it along with the button combo. That way you can decide in advance if this will be useful. There are 4 rings. With the exclusion of the last one, the rest are almost the same moves, upgraded for more damage, I guess. It's never explicitly stated that that's the case, so I just assume it. When you go to a higher level of a move, it changes the animation. It's really cool. In any other game, this will be just some percentage more damage. How about here? I don't know. I didn't notice any difference between them. Nevertheless, changing the moves is a very cool idea. On the final 4th ring there are 2 of the most powerful moves and some unexplained. The latter are like powerful bonuses used once per level, then it disappears. Besides the one where Neo can be resurrected instead of restarting from a checkpoint, the others are not explained what exactly they do. After I finished the game, I opened the manual and here they are. Unless you spend all your points on those, you'll get enough to acquire all the moves by the end of the game. It's not only punching and kicking. You can disarm enemies, steal their weapon and turn it against them. Depending on your position when you start doing it, Neo performs different animation. There is a couple of ways you can defend yourself. Probably the coolest is when you time your attacks with the enemy ones. Cool looking, but less effective than slowing down time. That way you block them with yours and vice versa. However, if an enemy is blocking your attacks, you can slow down time and walk/jump around him or press the dodge button with any of the 4 directions. The enemies can't turn around fast enough to counter you. As I said before, the regeneration of the focus meter is limited, so you can't stay constantly in slow motion and break the game. What enhances the experience is the sound design. Effects are either taken from the movies or that they've made them very close to the original. Punching, kicking, swishing felt authentic. Not only the sound effects are good. The original actors don't reprise their roles, but the people hired to do the voice acting did an excellent job to sound like them. Jennifer Hale even provides the voice of Trinity. The more you know. The music is quite good. They didn't use the original score but created something new, good and close to the movie music without sounding too familiar. There are some licensed tracks used in an utterly bizarre way and probably one of the reasons why there is no digital release. You can hear at the ending cinematic, "Queen, we are the champions." It doesn't fit at all. The decision to extend the universe in the game greatly benefited the level design. Every single scene you take part is extended in some way or altered a bit differently. This is a good thing, mostly. Probably the best example is the Merovingian levels. They are so diverse. Church where you fight the clones of Agent Smith, a dungeon, then a club, and others. But probably the most memorable is this. It reminded me of those paintings of impossible structures or optical illusions. This is probably the most creative level. The goal is to reach the top. The way you do it is by entering doors. Simple. It looks confusing at first, but it's not really. If you enter the wrong door, you probably won't know at first, but after one or two more, you will be sent back just before them. I didn't find this annoying. You do this while fighting human-sized ants that could be killed when thrown in fire. Why ants? It's anyone's guess. The Merovingian levels are the longest, which is good and bad. It's good because you can see the creativity of the level designers, and enemies here are very different, fast and furious with claws. And the ants, of course. When they surround you, they can drain your life very fast. The bad news comes from the save system. There are checkpoints in the levels, but if you exit the game after one, you have to start the level all over again. It's not a massive loss of time in most cases, but in these levels can be quite annoying. There are so many little disappointments and some big. They stack up and can get annoying. The worst is the mediocre shooting. It doesn't have nice feel to it. Max Payne does the shooting in slow motion much better. It's much more refined, so better off playing it if you're looking for third-person shooter. The way I avoid shooting sometimes is getting close to an enemy. Then they hide their weapon and want to punch you. Idiots. Admittedly, the shotgun is great, but the others are just alright, functional. The other big disappointment was the final boss. It's a giant smith made from old smiths and all sorts of rubbish. It's very dull. It's played after the Wachowski's explanation why the movie ending doesn't work in the game. All you do is avoid his attacks and hold space at the right time. Amazingly boring fight. The disjointed story also doesn't help a lot. All problems for me are a symptom of a rushed game. 2 years of development is not enough. And probably bigger budget will help too. I can't confirm it, but this is how the game feels. Rushed. Also 2 years after the movies, it's too late to be relevant. The PC port is supposedly missing some graphical effects that the consoles have, but when I looked up a comparison video, the PC version still looks better. It runs with 30 FPS and for some reason dips beneath them for a couple of seconds from time to time. It detracts to say the least. There is a lack of mouse control in the menus, but other than that it plays well. The prices are reasonable nowadays for all available platforms. One last thing, the game is not really difficult. I had some deaths, but in very few occasions I felt threatened. I can't deny I had fun. Being Neo is a blast. Doing everything he could is amazing. Beneath the rough edges, there is a fun game, especially if you like the Matrix movies. The saving grace is the hand-to-hand fights, level design, sound effects, and music. From all of the games I've played in this series, I can safely say this is one of the best despite the problems. The PC version is the way to go, even on the basis that it looks better than the console counterparts. But do some research to see for yourself. Just don't try to change any video options. It will crash. Just use the widescreen fix and don't touch anything. I didn't try how it plays or even if it takes my controller. Now for the end of the video, here is a montage with cool moments from the game. And if you played it, tell me how you feel about the game in the comments.
for the crutch again, Mr. Anderson. This is over. If you bury me, Mr. Anderson, there will always be more of me.